Miss Rachel here. I am in northern Washington today at the Nooksack River. You can see it rushing behind me. And today I'm on a hike near Mount Baker, and it's called the Horseshoe Bend Trail. So I'm going to show you some things that I find along the way. Let's go. So, Mount Baker is north of Seattle towards Canada. You can see Seattle, where we live, down here at the bottom of the map, and that big red marker at the top is Mount Baker. So Mount Baker is the third largest mountain in Washington state. The first two are Mount Rainier and Mount Adams. So, when melting ice and snow from Mount Baker flow down the side of the mountain, they flow into the Nooksack River. The river is 75 miles long, and it weaves through the forests and then on into the farmland, and then eventually it flows out into the Salish Sea and then out into the ocean. So Mount Baker National Forest is an old growth forest, which means it's hundreds of years old, and it has incredible biodiversity. Biodiversity means it's home to many different plants and animals. Walking through these old forests, you can see incredible things, some of which have grown here for hundreds of years. So, the forest floor is covered in these big leafy ferns. Okay, ferns love to grow in shady and wet places like this forest. So they're usually pretty easy to recognize because they have this feather kind of shaped leaf, and we call these leaves fronds. So ferns reproduce with something called spores instead of seeds like a lot of other plants. So they have millions of these tiny little spores on the underside of their leaves or fronds, and they get scattered into the air when a wind blows, and then when they fall on damp surfaces and soil, then a new fern can grow. Alright, so one of the most beautiful things about the forest is the velvety, pillowy green moss covering everything. So like ferns, moss loves wet and shady places like this forest. There are more than 10,000 different types of moss in the world. A patch of moss is made up of tiny moss plants all packed tightly together so that they can hold water like a sponge. So here you can see moss hanging from all the different trees throughout the forest. It's pretty cool. So this is something called a nurse log. A nurse log is an old tree that has fallen, and new trees have begun to grow out of it. So you can tell that this fallen tree is really old because of how big around it is. And the new trees are using the nutrients from the decaying tree so that they can grow nice and tall. So why do you think it's called a nurse log? So here is a super cool nurse log that I found. You can see that this big tall tree is wrapping its roots around this stump and using its nutrients to grow. Now on to my favorite thing to find in the forest, mushrooms. Mushrooms are a common type of fungus. They grow all over the world in areas with plenty of moistures. So some kind of mushrooms are the kinds you find in a grocery store, and they're yummy and they're good for you, but others are super poisonous. So it's important to know what type of mushroom you have found. There are over 10,000 varieties of mushroom. This type of mushroom is called a polypore, sometimes also called a shelf fungi because of how it sticks out of the side of the tree like a shelf. Polypores live on old tree trunks and consume the nutrients from the wood. This type of mushroom is called coral mushroom because they look kind of like the coral you might find underwater. So they are clusters of finger-like branches like this coming out of a little mushroom trunk like a stalk. This type of mushroom is called witch's butter. It's a jelly yellowy orange blob looking fungi that sticks to the side of wood. So mushrooms and fungi come in so many different shapes and sizes, and we have so many varieties all over Washington state, even here in Seattle. So keep your eyes peeled when you're on a walk or even in your own backyard, and maybe you can find some different types of mushrooms. Now this white droopy thing is something that I thought was a mushroom, but actually it is a wildflower. It's called ghost pipe. So this flower is commonly found in small clusters and blooms from June through September. So this cool spiky plant is called a devil's club. They grow to about 4 feet tall, and they have big, large leaves with small white flowers, which then turn into these small red berries at the top. So their stems are covered in sharp spikes, which they use to defend themselves from animals who might try to eat them. So many indigenous peoples use the inner bark and the root of the devil's club to make medicines to treat illness. So you may not see any animals on your hike, but you can see signs of animal life everywhere. So I love to look for animal homes while I'm hiking. Animals that like to burrow underground love to make dens under tree roots like this one. Who do you think lives here? A fox? A rabbit? All right, that is the end of our hike today, folks. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I love our Washington state forests, and it is so important that we work to protect them and that we get out and enjoy them when we can. And Walter had a great time too. All right, it is writing time. Answer these questions in a notebook, please. Number 1, pick one of the things I found on this hike. Write what you learned about it. Number 2, where does the water in the Nooksack River come from, and where does it go? If you forgot, go check out the beginning of the video again. And number 3, a nurse log is a tree that has fallen and has new trees growing out of it. Why do you think it's called a nurse log? What does it do that makes it kind of like a nurse? And don't forget to check back in next week for your next videos. Bye-bye.